evening, everyone, and welcome to Honpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii's Triple Celebration Buddhist Education Series. My name is Chado Kawa, and I'll be your MC today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's lecturer, Reverend Henry Adams. Reverend Henry Tolio Adams grew up in Buffalo, Minnesota. He discovered his interest in Buddhism during a one-year high school exchange program in Chennai, India. As an undergrad student at St. Olaf College, he began his study of Buddhist scriptures, and first considered pursuing the path to the ministry. After receiving an MA in Buddhist Studies from the University of Michigan, he moved to Miyazaki, Japan, where he worked for the Miyazaki prefectural government. In 2007, Reverend Adams moved to Kyoto, Japan, to pursue his ministerial studies at the Chuo Bukkyo Gakuin Buddhist Seminary. Upon graduating from the seminary, he began serving as a minister in the Buddhist Churches of America. In 2010, Reverend Adams has been serving at his current capacity as the resident minister of the San Mateo Buddhist Temple since 2013. Prior to coming to St. Mateo, he served at the Oxnard Buddhist Temple, Buddhist Churches of Santa Barbara, the San Luis Obispo Buddhist Temple, and the Guadalupe Buddhist Church. He also served as supervising minister for the Buddhist Church of San Francisco from September 2020 to May 2023. From September 2018 to May 2019, he served as a chaplain intern at the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center. He is married to Shoko and has three sons, Ryoma, age 12, who is born in Oxford, and Shoma, age 9, and Tokuma, age 4, who were born in San Mateo County. In recent years, he's enjoyed sharing his lifelong love for bicycling with his wives and sons. He spends most of his free time fixing bikes. Today's topic is Kyogyoshinsho, realization, birth in the Pure Land. Reverend Adams will share his presentation for 60 minutes, followed by a Q&A. During the Q&A, if you have any questions, comments, please put them in the chat. So without further ado, I would like to pass the mic on to Reverend Adams.
Great. Thank you, Chad, for your kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for me, this morning for all of you. It's great to be together today and to have this opportunity on this very momentous occasion, this triple celebration, celebrating the anniversary of the Hawaii Kyodan, as well as Shinran Shonin's birthday and the founding of the Jodo Shinshu teaching. And so for today's session, I've been given the honor of speaking about the chapter on realization, this question of enlightenment or awakening in our Buddhist tradition, and particularly our Jodo Shinshu perspective. And so I also hope to kind of relate some of this to Shinran Shonin's, some of his life experiences, the way he expresses the truth of awakening in his life, as well as the unique teachings of the Jodo Shinshu and how we understand this. So I wanted to begin by just talking a little bit about my initial encounter with the Jodo Shinshu teaching. I'm going to share the screen here. So yeah, I just wanted to get us started here. I'm going to be sharing a few slides. I don't have a bunch of slides, but mainly I'll be talking about some of Shinran Shonin's teachings. And so I wanted to be able to put those up on the screen so we can understand the meaning of his teachings. And I won't be, the slides will be there kind of as a support, let's put it that way, to what I'll be sharing. So I'll mainly be sharing some insights and appreciations inspired by the texts that I'll be sharing on the slides. But wanted to, again, begin by sharing a little bit about my own experience, my own journey in encountering the Jodo Shinshu teaching. Before I encountered Jodo Shinshu, my first connection with Buddhism was through actually the Zen tradition. As Chad mentioned, I grew up in Minnesota, and when I first got interested in Buddhism, I was looking for places to practice. Looking for Dharma centers. And at the time, the places that were kind of on my radar were the Zen centers, temples of the Zen tradition, and my initial experience of seeking a realization or awakening was in that Zen tradition. Now, from my perspective, realization in Buddhism is a shared goal, a common goal. And so when Buddhists talk about nirvana, for example, I believe that all Buddhists are essentially talking about the same thing, liberation from greed, anger, and ignorance. We say the word nirvana means to blow out a flame. And so our goal of realization for all of us is to blow out that flame of blind passions, to be free from the suffering and difficulty that arises through our attachments, anger, ignorance. And so for me, when I first encountered the Zen tradition, I had this idea of I'm going to get enlightened by myself. I'm going to attain enlightenment through my own efforts. Reading, of course, the heroic story of Shakyamuni Buddha, his path to enlightenment, leaving home, going out, seeking the path to awakening, years spent dedicated meditation practice, inspired me to seek that same path to enlightenment, the same path followed by Shakyamuni Buddha. So I was looking for places where I could learn to meditate and do meditation practice with the goal of realizing awakening, enlightenment. And so I went to Zen centers. I even traveled to Japan and spent time at Zen temples. And some of my kind of clearest experiences, memories from those times were being physically in pain. I don't have the most flexible legs, and my mind was scattered, and so I struggled with pain in my legs, pain in my back, trying to sit on the cushion, a lot of pain. And then also, mind racing. Even if I could be comfortable immediately, I'd start thinking about, well, what's for lunch, what's coming next. Trying to count my breath. One breath in, one breath out, breath in, one breath out. Wonder what's for lunch. Oh, I hear a fly. My allergies are bothering me, and so my mind was kind of going everywhere. Going all over the place. I remember asking one of the senior teachers there, I was like, does this ever get easier? He says, I don't know if it gets easier, but if you stick with it, you'll find the benefits, but the benefits depend on you and your dedication. And then it says, sit up straight, don't nod off, stay focused. A lot of encouragement, pushing it in my own mind, then beginning to hear that voice. Got to sit up straight, got to get up, got to meditate, got to do all of these things that I have to do in order to attain awakening, to attain that realization. And so I found that as I was seeking that awakening, seeking that liberation from the self, liberation from my ego, there was this voice in the back of my mind that was telling me, sit up straight, get up, get up early, got to do this. And on days when I would do what I thought I was supposed to do, voice would be giving me pats on the back. Oh, you're doing a good job. Oh, I'm a great meditator. I'm on the path. And then if I slept in, if I, was late for class and didn't take time meditating, then I would, get discouraged and feel like, oh, I'm not a good meditator. I'm not, on the path. And so there was this voice in the back of my head, and I realized that's my ego. And so I'm trying to attain realization from the liberation from the self by means of the self. And to me, that was a kind of contradiction there. And I want to be clear at this point that I don't believe that this is a contradiction or a problem with the Zen tradition, but rather it was a problem with me and my approach. And part of it probably not having close support of a Sangha. I was kind of on my own. I would pop in and out of these Zen centers, but wasn't really grounded in a Dharma community. And so in time, I kind of drifted away from that Buddhist practice and had this feeling that realization of awakening, that liberation, again, common to all Buddhist traditions, but there was no path for me to realize it. And at that time, I moved to Japan and I was working for the prefectural government in Miyazaki. And while I was there, I started to feel that something was missing. That again, I was longing for that path to awakening, longing for some sort of a sense of connecting that realization of the Buddha with my daily life experience. So I started to look around and look for temples where I could go. And there was a temple there in Miyazaki, a beautiful temple that I would often ride past on my bike on the way to the library. And it was called Shineji Temple. It's actually the temple of Baba Sensei's, ancestral temple there in Miyazaki. And so as I rode by one day, I noticed they had a big sign out front announcing the upcoming Dharma services that they would be having. I believe it may have been like Ohigan services, but they had a list of days and times when there would be Dharma speakers. And so I thought, I'll check this out. I got up my courage. I'd heard a little bit about Jodo Shinshu. I'd read Tanisho when I was in graduate school and was inspired by that. And so I thought, I'm curious. I'll check this out. But I really had no idea what to expect. Very kind of superficial understanding of Jodo Shinshu at that point. But I got up my courage and I thought I'll go into this temple for the first time. So my first time visiting a Jodo Shinshu temple. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I had certain ideas from my time at Zen temples where, there was an expectation, that we would all kind of work hard and very strict etiquette and guidelines. And if you were out of step, they let you know right away. So in order to maintain harmony, everybody followed the rules to maintain harmony. I had no idea what the rules were at a Jodo Shinshu temple, so I very cautiously kind of walked in, opened the door, the sliding gate, slid in, stepped in. There was a kind of a genkan, an entry area. There's a gentleman who was sitting at a desk, sorting out newsletters and organizing, recording donations and so forth. But he was there all by himself. And I could hear that there was sort of murmur coming from inside the hondo, the main hall. So people had already gone in. And he took one look at me and he stood up and he went straight into the hondo and then he closed the doors behind him. And I had no idea what to do. I was there by myself. And so I stood there in the stock still, wondering, should I just make a break for it and leave now? What's going to happen? And then after about a minute, the door opened up. He came back out with a very well-dressed woman, very confident, marched right up to me. And I thought in my mind here, okay, this person's the enforcer. They're the one who's going to sort of tell me, thanks, but no thanks, and send me on my way. But to my surprise, she said to me in perfect English, "Hello, welcome to Shineji Temple. Please come with me." She welcomed me into the main hall of the hondo, into that area right before Amida Buddha. And she invited me to sit down. She sat there right next to me. She got out a service book. She handed it to me. She said, "Okay, we're going to be chanting on this page." And she looked at it and she said, "Oh, it's all in Japanese. Can you read this?" And I said, "Well, I see there's hiragana there, so I think I'll be okay." And she said, okay, good. Okay, so now they're going to toll the bell. And when they do, we're all going to join our hands like this. This is called gasho. I'd been to some temples. I thought, okay, gasho, this is familiar. And we're going to say Namo Amida Butsu or Namanda Butsu. And I thought, okay, Namanda Butsu. Yeah, like that. Okay. So I waited, and then they're tolling the bell. And then everybody in unison, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. And I just heard them saying Namanda Butsu. And then also repeated that. It just naturally flowed, hearing, then saying, without really thinking about it, Namanda Butsu, Namanda Butsu. And then we all bowed. And the woman who'd kindly been there accompanying me sort of leaned over and gave me a thumbs up and said, "Good job." I thought, this is really unusual. So I spent a fair amount of time at Buddhist temples up to this point. No one's ever said good job. It's always been sit up straight, stay focused, don't squirm, don't nod off. And I thought in that moment, there's something interesting about this teaching. Somehow I got the feeling that my Namo Amida Butsu was just as efficacious, just as powerful as the Namo Amida Butsu of the gentleman sitting the other side of me, who, by the looks of him, had been saying Namo Amida Butsu for at least 80 years. And somehow my brand new Namo Amida Butsu and his Namo Amida Butsu that's steeped in a life of the Nembutsu, decades of practice, you might say, was somehow equally efficacious, equally true and meaningful. And I wondered, how can this be? And so I wanted to listen. So I listened very intently to that Dharma talk that day and subsequent Dharma talks, trying to understand that teaching, that truth. And we have hints to that. How can that be in the writings of Shinran Shonin? So I want to talk about that. Today we're talking about the chapter on realization. So how can this realization be attained by someone like me, filled with greed, anger, and ignorance? So Shinran Shonin says, the vow of necessary attainment. He's talking about this. He says, realization of nirvana occurs when we are born in the Pure Land. Shinran Shonin quotes this 11th vow from the larger sutra. It says the vow of necessary attainment is stated in the larger sutra. This is one of the central themes, the passages that Shinran begins with in this chapter of realization. And he says, he quotes Amida Buddha, says, if when I attain Buddhahood, the human beings and devas in my land do not dwell among the settled and necessarily attain enlightenment, may not attain the supreme enlightenment. So Amida Buddha is vowing for us to attain awakening. And so for Shinran Shonin, the meaning of realization in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, Shinran Shonin says, to reveal with reverence the true realization. It is the wondrous state attained through Amida's perfect benefiting of others. It is the ultimate fruition of supreme nirvana. It arises from the vow of necessary attainment of nirvana. That's that passage that I just read, also known as the vow of realization of great nirvana. So this is a lot. I think anytime we read from Kyogyoshinsho, and especially, also from the larger sutra, we have to keep in mind that these texts were written, in the case of the larger sutra, thousands of years ago, in another language. It's been through layers of translation to get to us. Even the words of Shinran Shonin, this year we celebrate the 800th anniversary of the publishing of this text, the Kyogyoshinsho. So it's truth that comes to us from a long time ago, from a great distance, and so it's distilled into very abstract expressions. So I'm going to try to kind of break this down a little bit. So in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, we talk about the realization. It's attained through Amida Buddha's great compassion. So I think about, how is it that my Namo Amida Butsu was just as powerful and efficacious as somebody who'd been saying it for decades upon decades? It's because it's not something that's accomplished through me and my efforts. It doesn't depend on me, rather depends on the great compassion of Amida Buddha. It's directed to me. And so it's a kind of decentering of the self, of the ego. It's receiving that wisdom from the Buddha, flowing through me into this expression of Amida, of Namo Amida Butsu. And so these words, Namo Amida Butsu, this is my expression of my gratitude, my appreciation for the truth stated here in these words of Shinran Shonin, that our attainment of realization, our blowing out that flame of greed, anger, and ignorance, but that is attained through Amida Buddha. So our task in this life is to hear the Dharma and to entrust ourselves to the wisdom of the Nembutsu, to Amida Buddha. So when we think about our attainment of nirvana, realization, when will that occur? When will that occur in our lives? For me, when I first encountered the Buddhist teachings, again, reading that inspiring heroic story of Shakyamuni Buddha's path, my thinking was, I'm going to attain that in this very body. I'm going to strive for that in this lifetime. I'm going to awaken that mind in this life, in this body that is filled with greed, anger, and ignorance. I'm somehow going to cut that off so that I can realize pure awakening. I'm going to become a Buddha in this very lifetime. Now that was probably almost 30 years ago. I was in my late teens when I first encountered this. I just turned 47 yesterday, so it's been a journey for me. And the longer I go on this Nembutsu journey, the deeper my appreciation for the truth that as long as I'm alive, I'm going to have this greed, anger, and ignorance. It's a part of who I am. But because of that, I'm embraced by the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. And so Shinran Shonin offers us this assurance that we don't need to be liberated from greed in this body. We don't need to cut off our greed, anger, and ignorance to receive the liberation from the Buddha. And so I think this is very important and very relevant to the way that we think about death in our Jodo Shinshu tradition. When we talk about birth in the Pure Land, we talk about someone who was born in the Pure Land. In our Nishi Hongwanji tradition, we're talking about the end of their lives, that birth in the Pure Land occurs at the end of life for us. Now, if you look at this chapter on realization, it's interesting. I searched it, the other day as I was preparing my lecture notes, and the words death, end of life, none of that appears in this chapter on realization. And yet, if we look at Shinran Shonin's other writings and the culture of our Jodo Shinshu tradition, we find that we take great comfort in the truth of these teachings as we think about the end of life. This was certainly the case for Shinran Shonin. He said, this is not in the Kyogyoshinsho, but in one of his letters, he is grieving the loss of many of his friends. And if we think about ourselves and the lives of our temple at this time of year, we're sort of in Obon season. Many of our temples are having Hatsubon services right around this time, July, August. There's a lot of Hatsubon services where we look back and we reflect upon. We hear those Hatsubon names read. Maybe our temple has a custom of inviting Hatsubon families to come forward to offer incense or to light lanterns. So it's a time when we're thinking about all of those loved ones who have passed away, who have crossed over to the other shore. And in that time, we can also look to the wisdom of Shinran Shonin. This is a letter Shinran Shonin wrote to one of his good Dharma friends, Doshimbo. And Shinran Shonin writes, "It is saddening that so many people, both young and old, men and women, have died this year and last. But the Tathagata taught the truth of life's impermanence for us fully, so you must not be distressed by it. I, for my own part, attach no significance to the condition, good or bad, of persons in their final moments. People in whom Shinjin is determined do not doubt, and so abide among the truly settled. For this reason, their end also, even for those ignorant and foolish and lacking in wisdom, is a happy one." So to me, I read this and I think he could be talking about, this could be the opening words of a Hatsubon Dharma talk. Think about it. It's sad that so many people, both young and old, men and women, have died this year and the last. But the Tathagata is the Buddha, the thus come one, the one who has come from ultimate reality into our lives, so has gone and come back, right? And so he taught the truth of impermanence, that death is a part of our lives, and so we cannot be distressed about it. It's saddening, but it's also something that we can have a settled mind, a settled heart with relation to. And so Shinran says something really interesting here. He says, I, for my part, attach no significance to the condition, good or bad, of persons in their final moments. So I think oftentimes when we part with loved ones, they may not be conscious. I know, in some cases, family members undergo really profound changes at the end of life. I see this, even among my own family members and relatives, people who throughout their lives been the most kind, gentle, loving, sweet people. As different changes of mind and body occur with the approaching of the end of life, can have issues with anger, confusion, various kinds of really unsettling. It's like it's a different person. And how do we understand that? If our path to realization or awakening were dependent upon ourselves and our own state of mind, then we might question, can that person really be born in the Pure Land with, the way they're acting, the way they're behaving? I thought so up until a couple months ago, but now things are different. But Shinran Shonin assures us that it's not dependent on that person, but rather it's the working of Amida Buddha that carries them over. So we don't need to worry about people's state of being at the end of life. I think, again, at this Hatsubon, Obon season, as we're thinking back on loved ones and reflecting on our own journey of grief, whether it's this past year or at some point in the distant past, we can really take comfort in these teachings of Shinran Shonin, assuring us that it is our settling of the essential matters in the day-to-day moment of life that is what enables us to receive that boundless compassion of Amida Buddha carrying us over to the other shore. So I want to return to look at this vow again. So what we have here in these words of Shinran Shonin, the larger sutra quoted by Shinran Shonin, is the assurance that those who are born in the Pure Land will unfailingly dwell among the settled and attain nirvana. So those who, with the settled mind, the mind of entrusting that we heard about in the previous session on Shinjin, that those who have that settled mind are assured to realize the state of nirvana through birth in the Pure Land. And so this connection, that Shinran Shonin makes for us between the end of life and birth in the Pure Land, illustrating this truth taught by the Buddha that for those who do not attain awakening in this life, who are unable to, who then entrust themselves to Amida Buddha, are assured to attain that state of nirvana through birth in the Pure Land. And so with that perspective, then our attitude towards death becomes much more, I would say, kind of liberated. That we're settled. Death no longer becomes terrifying and scary. And we see this in the life of Shinran Shonin himself. Shinran Shonin journeyed throughout Japan. He was born in the Hino no Sato, the area of just outside Kyoto, the ancestral lands of the Hino clan. He spent much of his life in that kind of area, Hino, and then Mount Hiei, and then back in Kyoto, where he was studying with his teacher Honen Shonin. He was um, in his kind of prime years, was sent into exile because of opposition to Honen Shonin's teaching. And then from this exile place, he was sent into Echigo, which is modern day now is called Niigata area. And then when his exile was concluded, he was invited to return back to Kyoto. He was given permission, rather, to return to Kyoto. He chose, rather than going back to Kyoto, he joined a group of farmers who were moving from the Echigo area, which is famous for its rice production even today. Some of the most delicious rice and sake too comes from that area. And they were traveling to Kamakura, which was at that time being built up as a new city. So as we often find, throughout the history of human civilization, where new cities, new development, things are changing, people are moving, people are immigrating. This was the case, with the development of agriculture, in Hawaii, where you had the folks from Japan, the ancestors of the Hawaii Kyodan, coming from Japan, then as part of that movement of agricultural workers into an area that was experiencing growth and change 135 years ago. And so that's part, in a sense, of the tradition of Shinran Shonin, who also joined this community of people who are traveling from Echigo into the Kamakura, into that new Kansai, rather Kanto area, the area around what's now Tokyo. But that area was being kind of transformed from a swamp using new agricultural techniques into rice paddies and habitable land and arable land. And so Shinran Shonin joined this movement. And when he arrived there, it's not as if there were no Buddhist teachers there prior to that, or no spiritual leaders. There was a gentleman by the name of Bennen, who was a renowned kind of Yamabushi, a mountain ascetic, who people really looked up to and admired, and considered to have attained some realization, but a realization that brought with it great powers. So people thought that Bennen had these special powers through his realization that he had attained through his own great efforts. And he could be called upon to help to bring the rains through certain ceremonies he might conduct. He could be called upon to perhaps to remedy illnesses, solve all kinds of different problems. And so people would go to him looking for support. And he was kind of one of the people in that community where Shinran moved into that people really admired and respected. And so when Shinran moved in, as people recognized him as a priest, he wore the priestly garb. And I imagine they're asking, what can you do? Can you cure illness? No. Can you help us with the rains here? Sorry, no. Well, what do you do? What kind of Buddhist are you? And he would have said, Namo Amida Butsu. I'm a person who has no power from myself, but it's all what I receive from Amida Buddha. And this teaching was really moving for people. Shinran Shonin would say things like, well, and if it doesn't rain, even if things don't go our way, that this Nembutsu teaching will give us the peace of mind to be able to face whatever comes in life. We can't control the causes and conditions, can't control the time when we pass, but with the Nembutsu in our hearts, we're assured that we will arrive at this state of realization. And so more and more people would gather in Shinran's place. And Bennen started to ask around, where is Shinran? Or where is everybody? Why are people not coming? And we started to hear rumors of this teacher, Shinran. And he decided to confront him. And he went to a place called Itajikiyama, where Shinran was known to travel. And he waited there with his bow and arrow. We have portrait paintings of Shinran Shonin and of Bennen waiting with his bow and arrow ready to shoot, and Shinran Shonin didn't appear. He wasn't there. And this, and so, Bennen would ask, where did he go? He says, well, actually, he took the other road on the other side of the mountain. So he waited on that side, no Shinran. And so ultimately, he went directly to Shinran's home and knocked at the door. Said, Shinran, come on out. Come on out. And Shinran, we're told, did come on out. And whereas other people who were there at the time saw Bennen with his animal skins and weaponry, a sword, bow and arrow, scary beard, and long hair, ferocious look on his face, and he at that time he's threatening Shinran. He says, Shinran, here, I'm ready. I'm here to kill you. And Shinran, perfectly calm, knowing that the end of life without fail, born in the Pure Land. Says, well, I entrust these matters to Amida Buddha, the matters of birth and death. So, if it's my time, it's my time. But how about you? What really brings you here? And Bennen, seeing Shinran's countenance, his calm facial expression, then expecting a fight, but being welcomed, said he discarded his weapons, he cast off his animal skins, and he bowed in reverence and asked if he could join Shinran Shonin Sangha. And Shinran Shonin welcomed him as a friend, recognizing that this was somebody who had experienced this sincere change of heart. But Shinran, in that moment, having no fear of death there, knowing that whatever the circumstances of his life, his destination was settled on the direction of birth in the Pure Land. So in the Jodo Shinshu teaching, we're taught that this attainment, this comfort, this assurance of our destination in the Pure Land is brought about by the working of Amida Buddha. It's not through our own efforts, but rather it's that which we receive from Amida Buddha. We use this expression, the Buddha's direction of virtue for our going forth to the Pure Land. But then Shinran also talks about the directing of virtue for our return to this world. And he cites the larger sutra, and he's citing Tanluan and Tanluan and Vasubandhu. He quotes from Tanluan and Vasubandhu, and the 22nd vow talks about this is the 22nd vow from the Sutra of Immeasurable Life. This is the larger sutra again. So Amida Buddha established 48 vows, and the Kyogyoshinsho is sort of structured around the vows that Shinran Shonin considered to have the clearest expression of the truth of the Buddha's awakening. And so this chapter on realization is primarily focused on this 11th vow, this assurance that we will all attain awakening, but also appreciated through the 22nd vow, which assures us that those who are born into the Pure Land don't just hang out there and just enjoy, the bliss all by themselves. It's like they've gotten the benefit and now they'll just enjoy that for themselves, but rather they are returning back, coming back into our hearts to be our guides, to guide us. And so I'll share this passage now. You can understand some of this meaning here. So this again is Amida Buddha speaking. When I attain Buddhahood, the bodhisattvas of other Buddha lands who come and are born in my land ultimately and unfailingly attain the rank of succession to Buddhahood after one lifetime, except for those who, in accordance with their original vows, freely to guide others to enlightenment, don the armor of universal vows for the sake of sentient beings, accumulate roots of virtue, emancipate all beings, travel to Buddha lands to perform bodhisattva practices, make offerings to all the Buddhas and Tathagatas throughout the 10 quarters, awaken sentient beings countless as the sands of the Ganges, and bring them to abide firmly in the unexcelled right true way. Such bodhisattvas surpass ordinary ones, manifest the practices of all the bodhisattva states, and discipline themselves in the virtue of Samantabhadra. Should it not be so, may I not attain the supreme enlightenment. Okay. Again, I appreciate that, when we're reading from the larger sutra, it's not, it's an abstract distillation of the truth for us. It's not always the most accessible, maybe at the first pass, but the meaning that we can appreciate from this, what this is saying, that those who are born into the Pure Land, they don't just but rather they immediately flow back. They attain that realization, and with that realization comes boundless compassion and care for others, and they're able to then come back into our lives as our guides. And this is really an important concept for how we understand our memorial services, our funerals and memorial services in the Jodo Shinshu tradition. We think about a person who has passed away. The basic question is, where did they go? What happened to them? Our Jodo Shinshu teaching is very clear. They realize birth in the Pure Land. It means liberation from all of the limitations of our human life. And how do we experience our relationship with them after they have gone over to the other shore? We encounter them as bodhisattvas, as we often also say as Buddhas who come back into our lives to guide us on our own journey. We think about this when we recall the lives of our loved ones after they have departed. That life is no longer limited to this human body, this human presence. The wisdom that they shared with us while they were here with us in this world continues to guide us long after they cross over to the other shore. We may only truly appreciate it many years later, the ways in which the lessons they taught, our experiences with them, which were many of which perhaps were difficult and challenging, but have brought us to this point at which we're able to understand and hear the Dharma teaching. Likewise, with their compassion and kindness, things that they did that we didn't appreciate at the time, or ways in which their lives are an expression of boundless compassion that we can't maybe wrap our head around, our mind around. Why was it that way? Why did things go that way? But again, it was that relationship that brought us here to this moment of hearing the Dharma, hearing this message of the Nembutsu. And so if we think about the meaning of Hatsubon in a kind of mainstream Japanese Buddhist perspective, Hatsubon is the first Obon time when loved ones, from again a kind of mainstream perspective, would return from a destination in one of the sixth realms. So the idea that a person who did not attain liberation prior to their death in this lifetime, then they go around again in the cycle of death and rebirth. They go and they're born in another realm. Could be another birth in the human realm, could be a birth in even one of the heavenly realms, or the realm of hungry ghosts like Mahamudgalyayana's mother, and at the root of the Obon story. And then it's during that Obon season, according again to traditional East Asian Buddhist understanding, that they would come back at that time, between the 13th and the 15th of maybe July or August, depending on which region, a community is celebrating Obon. But during that Obon time, that's the time when we welcome the ancestors back from one of the other 6 realms. And then they depart at the end of that time and go back to the 6 realms. So this is different. Let me be clear. This is different from the Jodo Shinshu understanding of Obon and Hatsubon. Because again, we're taught that at that moment of death, realization in the Pure Land, complete liberation. So they're no longer stuck in the cycle of death and rebirth. What a wonderful reality for us to appreciate. So when we have a funeral service, we're understanding and appreciating our loved one's birth in the Pure Land. It's a sad time. We miss them. We're lonely without them here in our lives, but we can take comfort in the truth that they have been born in the Pure Land. And then when Obon time comes around, we feel their presence. But it's not just for those 3 days of the year that they come back, but we're taught that moment to moment throughout the year, throughout our lives, for the rest of our lives, they're with us as our guides on our journey to awakening. So all of our subsequent funeral memorial services, we observe all of these traditional rituals, the 49th day, for example, which would traditionally be the time in which that next birth in one of the other realms would occur. But for us, they've already been born in the Pure Land, so why even bother having the 49th day? We do it because, well, their reality is that instant birth in the Pure Land. For us, it takes time. It takes 49 days to really begin to appreciate that new life, that new birth, to settle into that new reality. It's different. The moment of passing, that frame of mind we're in with the Makuragyo service, that first service after someone passes away, the bedside service, the funeral service, maybe the 7th day, the 49th day, we're marking these waypoints on our journey of understanding and appreciating how our loved ones have become for us now bodhisattvas guiding from the Pure Land. And so Hatsubon is a beautiful tradition where we come together to comfort one another as a Sangha, as a community, appreciate the truth of the Buddha's teachings. It's really, it reminds me very much of the story of Kisa Gotami. Gotami was one of a woman who lived at the time of the Buddha, and she had struggled to conceive and was treated very badly by her in-laws for not bearing children, not bearing a son. And when she finally was able to conceive a child and give birth to a son, her life was great. She had the joy of motherhood. Also, everyone, suddenly became really nice to her. Her life was wonderful. And she doted on her child and allowed her child to play freely. And at one point, her child, while playing, had a tragic injury and lost his life. And it said that she had taken up that the corpse of her child and carried it around the village, asking people, going to all the doctors, anyone who had some healing knowledge, asking them to bring the child back to life, thinking that it wasn't dead, not even asking them to bring it back to life, but cure this child of his illness. He won't respond. Cure him. People thought she was crazy, but they said there's one person who might be able to help you. Go see the Shakyamuni, go see the Buddha. And when she went to the Buddha, he said, I think I can help you, but I need you to bring a mustard seed. Bring me a mustard seed from a family that has not known loss, that has not had a death in the family. And so she went door to door asking for mustard seeds. Mustard seeds, very common in Indian cooking, tiny little seed, one seed, freely given, but each family would share with her their story of loss. Oh, do you have a mustard seed I could have? Certainly. Oh, and by the way, have you lost a loved one recently? And in each case, the family would tell a story of their grief and their mourning. And finally, after family to family, every house she went to had experienced a loss. She realized this is part of life, and she returned to the Buddha. He said, "Did you find the mustard seed?" She said, "The matter of the mustard seed is settled." So she had a funeral for her child, and then she became a follower of the Buddha's teachings. So this understanding, this way of coming together and comforting one another, dealing with that separation of loss, but also coming together to appreciate that all of these loved ones we remember, to be reminded that they all have gone forth, realized, attained that realization, and then now they come back into our lives as bodhisattvas returned from the Pure Land. So, and so I want to, in the time that remains, I want to talk a little bit about the last section of this chapter on realization, which describes kind of our process of coming to understand this teaching, our process on the path to realization. And again, this is Shinran Shonin quoting Vasubandhu and Tanluan. It describes these 5 stages, 5 gates. I want to talk about these for a bit. As concerning a perfect fulfillment of the practice of benefiting. So this is, again, how this whole process occurs, this going from our seeking of awakening and then this returning. So the Buddha's directing of virtue for our attainment, for our going forth, and then the Buddha also directs his virtue for our returning. So again, all of this whole process occurs through the Buddha's directing of virtue. And so it says there are 5 gates. They describe these 5 gates. The Bodhisattva has fulfilled these 5 gates of virtue and order. Reflect on this. What are these 5 gates? First is the gate of approach. So go just direction, having the direction. And then the gate of the great assembly, coming into community. The gate of the grounds, being settled. The gate of the residence. So the first, the initial settling, and then really remaining and receiving that benefit of being settled. And then 5th, the gate of the state of sporting in the gardens of forest. So kind of settled and then going back out. So I'm going to kind of break this process down. Okay, so first is the aspect of approach. This is described by Vasubandhu and Tanluan as the gate of bowing and reverence, often translated here as the gate of worship. And I think of this in terms of our own lives as coming into the Hondo, entering into the Hondo, offering incense. That's our bowing practice, is that offering of incense. So in the first gate of the virtue of entrance, one worships Amida Buddha with the desire to be born in the Pure Land. Thereby, one is enabled to attain birth in the realm of happiness. This is termed the first gate. To worship the Buddha and aspire for birth in the Buddha's land is the first aspect of virtue. So this is kind of that first step. I think about this often. This is one of the first things that first Buddhist activities people do. Maybe they do it at a funeral, coming to the funeral of a loved one, or the first time they come into the temple, they see everyone's there offering incense. What's that all about? Hopefully someone invites them and says, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This initial approach. And the wonderful thing I think about this, we talk about kind of worshiping Amida Buddha. I have my questions about this sort of this expression in English, because it gives us the sense of like we're worshiping in kind of some sort of like a dualistic way. Like there's sort of the Buddha is some sort of like Godhead out there that I'm worshiping. We use that. I mean, it's a fine word in English, but I think it confuses in our American cultural context. It confuses the meaning of this. It's really this bowing that is essential. The bowing is the we humble our own ego before the larger truth. And so the person comes into a funeral service, they come for the Hatsubon service for a relative, and they're doing that incense offering, even if they don't identify as a Buddhist, even if they have another religious tradition, they can participate in that because the bowing is humbling ourselves before this inconceivable truths of life and death, this reality that is expressed in, for us in Amida Buddha is our the form in which we can relate, the formless form that we can relate to in that ultimate truth. It's the ability to sort of to bow. It's a physical expression of letting go of our pride and our ego, to recognize that the ultimate truth is not within me, but rather comes into me through my encounter with the wisdom of the Buddha. The next aspect is joining the assembly. This is the recitation, the saying, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Babutsu. That that saying is also it's the hearing. It's the hearing. It says in the second gate, virtue of entrance, one praises Amida Buddha, saying the Tathagata's name in accord with the name's significance and practicing in correspondence with the Tathagata's light, which is the embodiment of wisdom. There one is able to join the great assembly. This is termed the second gate of entrance. To offer praise in accordance with the significance of the Tathagata's name is the second aspect of virtue. So it's, to say Namo Amida Butsu, so you've come into the space, but when you say Namo Amida Butsu, it's that hearing and saying, it's that togetherness, to be in a Sangha experience, whether it's physically in a temple, but even on a Zoom call, we're all together. When we say Namo Amida Butsu together, we are, even though we're separated by thousands of miles, oceans, time zones, vast bodies of land, we're together in this moment of the Nembutsu. We've joined that assembly. We're experiencing together in that moment that same compassion of the Buddha at work in our hearts that carries us forth and ultimately enables us to return as well. Attaining the settled mind, awareness of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. This is where something begins to change in our mind. We begin to appreciate, to notice the Buddha at work in our lives. So the third gate of entrance, one thinks solely on Amida with singleness of heart and aspires to be born in the Pure Land. And being born there, one performs the practices of shamatha, the samadhi of tranquility. Shamatha is a focused, settled mind. It's like a mind that becomes like a clear pool. Thereby, one is able to enter into the lotus-held world. This is termed the third gate of entrance. Because one practices tranquility, the calming of the mind, one aspires single-heartedly to be born in the Pure Land. This is the third aspect of virtue. So again, starting to notice and appreciate things about ourselves, to look within our own minds and see what is truly there. We need to, the noise needs to quiet down a little bit. The greed, the anger, the ignorance, that's all going to just keep running. But to have that presence of mind to say, oh, okay, well, here comes the ego, here comes the anger. That's a kind of awareness that we come to receive through the light of the Buddha's wisdom. It talks about the light shining, and it helps us to see. We see what it is. It doesn't necessarily make everything perfect within ourselves, but we are able to see our imperfect selves and recognize how we are embraced by the Buddha. And then the next aspect, abiding in practice, receiving insight into ways that one can practice kindness for others. concerning the fourth gate, the virtue of entrance, thinking solely on the wondrous adornments and contemplating them, one practice vipassana, thereby one is able to reach that place and enjoy the delights of and the various tastes of the Dharma. This is termed the gate of entrance, delights of the various delights of the various tastes of Dharma. In vipassana, there is the taste of contemplation on the Buddha's purity, the taste of the Mahayana that takes in and receives all sentient beings, the taste of ultimate sustenance of beings without any futility, the taste of performing practice by accommodating oneself to beings and vowing to establish a Buddha land. There are countless such tastes of adornments of the Buddha way, hence various. This is the fourth aspect of virtue. And so there's a word that you might hear, vipassana. Vipassana is like insight meditation. So it's talking about the shamatha and vipassana for one use Pali terms instead of Sanskrit. But it's the idea that when the mind becomes settled like a calm body of water, then things start to be reflected, like moonlight, sunlight, reflections of trees or buildings or whatever is there can be seen clearly in that calm body of water. So the shamatha is sort of that calming of the mind, the vipassana, or in Sanskrit, pasyana is that insight to see what is real. You know, the way this works for us in the Nembutsu tradition is we through the Nembutsu come to see that light. The light shines in, helps us to see ourselves as we are, and then we can see that there are things that we can do for others, ways in which we might be able to live differently, and ultimately helps us to see that path that we need to move forward on, the path of journeying together with others in the tradition. And then finally, this emerging. So talk about the directing, the heading in the direction, the Buddha's directing of virtue for our going forth, and then for returning, emerging, coming out. So like sort of like you come out of the temple and you come out into the world. You know, in our Jodo Shinshu tradition, you know, we don't have this sort of secluded monastic practice that you might find in other Buddhist traditions. You know, even I'm a minister. Baba Sensei and Hojo Sensei. So you have lots of ministers here with us. You know, we spend a lot of time at the temple, but we're also out in the world. All of our Sangha members, we come into the temple, we hear the Dharma together, we join a Zoom, even if we don't have a physical temple we go to. We have these times in our life when we come together and hear the teachings, but then we are also out in the world. And so the way this manifests in this process is concerning the fifth gate, the virtue of emergence. With great compassion, one observes all sentient beings in pain and affliction, and assuming various transformed bodies to guide them, enters the gardens of birth and death and the forests of blind passions. Sporting freely there with transcendent powers, one attains the state of teaching and guiding. This is brought about by the directing of virtue through the power of primal vow. It is called the fifth gate of emergence. So here we have this sense, again, I think about our loved ones. We return to our kind of appreciation of the Hatsubon season. Our loved ones gone forth to the Pure Land. They realize that awakening. They go through those gates of, you know, the worshiping, praising, the settled mind, the moment of insight, and then they come back into our lives, and we experience that and really feel that with bon dancing, bon odori. It's one of the ways in which we appreciate that. You know, we remember them, we have those feelings of missing them, sadness, but we're joyfully coming together as a sangha, joining in these movements, and we feel that they're with us, they're guiding us, and they're they're sporting, sporting kind of freely there, you know, in enjoying enjoying this working of the Buddha's compassion with us. And in this way, we experience their joy also as our joy, this joy in the Nembutsu. So these are the ways in which I appreciate Shinran's chapter on realization, um, uh, and particularly, again, how all of this activity, going forth and returning, all of this is done not through our own efforts, but is the virtue directed to us by Amida Buddha. So I want to conclude my remarks at this time. And then we have some time for some questions. I think we'll take maybe a 5-minute break. So I will stop my screen share here. And maybe I'll see, maybe Chad has some guidance he'd like to share with us.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Reverend Adams, for your very insightful presentation. We'll now take a 5-minute break, so if everyone could please return to your place at 11:12, we will then begin the Q&A after that. Thank you. I would like to welcome everyone back as we move into the Q&A section. So if anyone has any questions or comments for Reverend Adams, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Okay, great. There is one in the chat. Let's see. Just wanting to know if there's a residential community in the USA where people follow Amida Buddha's teachings. That's an interesting question. By residential community, I am understanding that to mean like kind of like a monastic, like a residential sangha community. And I think one that comes to mind is the IBS dorm. I think a few of our students, the Institute of Buddhist Studies, is our graduate school in Berkeley, California, and that is kind of a residential sort of setting where people, students there live in the dormant. There's a dormitory setting of people following, studying for ministry. It's a place where people who are studying to be ministers would be able to be in residence and studying. But I might take a step back and think about really the essence of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism as householder Buddhism. And so I would say, in a sense, every family of Jodo Shinshu Buddhists is a kind of a residential community of people following the Jodo Shinshu tradition. So within, and it's an interesting one, right? I mean, in my residential community, I think we had a few birthdays after I sent my bio info to Reverend Tomioka. It's my kids are 13, 10, and 5 now. And then, my wife and I are both in our 40s, but so we have our residential community too of people following the Nembutsu teaching. But yeah, that's interesting. Let's see, another question. When we die and go to the Pure Land, do we become a bodhisattva first or become a Buddha? That's an interesting question as well. Shinran Shonin uses both terms. He talks about Nembutsu, Jobutsu, Kore Shinshu. He says that to say the Nembutsu and to become a Buddha, this is Jodo Shinshu. And we talk also about, that when we go to the Pure Land, we do realize Buddhahood. There's also that, we talk about the returned bodhisattvas. The way that I think about this is, to understand it from the essential Buddhist perspective of non-self, that there's not like a fixed self. Is it a Buddha? Is it a bodhisattva? But rather, when we get into this level of awakening, I think of it personally as the kind of the manifestation, the way in which we encounter it. So a bodhisattva, to my understanding and appreciation, a bodhisattva is active in this world. And so when we take that, when that form, that experience of appreciating a loved one back in our lives, we understand that as as the work and activity of a bodhisattva. Um, but when we think about a person who's born in the Pure Land, they're liberated from that self. And so it's, I think that's kind of the tricky shift to go beyond the idea of now I'm a Buddha, that I is it's gone, right? So I think it's, it's both depending on the angle. If you think about like a person, you can be a person, could be a brother and a son, or a brother and a and a father, or it can have all of this. The same person, look viewed from different angles, can can have different aspects. And so I think one who is awakened in the Pure Land has both that Buddha aspect and the Bodhisattva aspect. And I welcome follow-up questions too if I'm not answering the questions or misunderstanding or something occurs to you. Yeah.
This person's thinking of something like an ashram. They're 81 years old and really would like to live the rest of their life with like-minded folks. So
There are some there are some assisted living facilities that have a number of Jodo Shinshu Buddhists. If you're thinking like Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, there are some. I mean, I'm familiar with the San Francisco Bay Area. That's where I live. There are a couple like the Kimochi homes. They're usually Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, and I know that Jodo Shinshu ministers also go to do services at them. I believe the Stevenson Buddhist Temple in Canada. I think there's a senior living facility. I'm not sure if it's like an assisted living facility, but the thing about Jodo Shinshu is that, like, if I think about like an ashram setting, is that there is a kind of program of meditation and things that is part of the daily program. But in terms of the Jodo Shinshu, it's a very personalized practice. We certainly come together in community, and a temple like a community may have services different times of the week. But I'm not familiar of something like a Jodo Shinshu ashram. There is a place that one of our temple members in San Mateo recently moved to in Northern California called Enso Village, and it's a Buddhist senior living facility. And I know they do have some space available. So, and there are Jodo Shin. I knew at least one Jodo Shinshu Buddhist who is in residence there. But they also have different kinds of meditation and activities there. But that's one that comes to mind. But I think perhaps there's a need for that as well.
it's okay. I kind of had a small question. So I was kind of wondering, in a sense of modern relevance, like how do I guess we mentioned how like our sect is a little more comprehensive to other people, but on how they resonate with other groups. But are there any aspects of the teachings that are particularly relevant or challenging in today's context?
I think the thing that's most to me relevant and and sort of challenging to our worldview is the inclusivity of Jodo Shinshu teachings. And I do mean that in terms, of course, that carries the sense of the Jodo Shinshu teaching is very um, conducive to what we often mean of inclusivity, like being inclusive of people of a variety of gender identities and sexual orientation and racial ethnic background and all of those sort of the things I think we often mean by inclusivity. I think is resonates with the Jodo Shinshu teaching or Jodo Shinshu perspective support that kind of inclusivity work. But at the same time, Also inclusivity of viewpoints and welcoming. I think that's what's most challenging and most relevant and necessary about the Jodo Shinshu teaching at the moment, is the sense that everyone, was welcome, no matter who you're going to vote for in November. You're welcome under, the Jodo Shinshu tent, and that's really challenging because sometimes we think, I think, like, wow, like, how could people think like that? How could people have that perspective? But the Jodo Shinshu teaching really challenges us um to reflect upon that and to think about um that all beings are embraced in Amida Buddha's compassion, that we're all fellow travelers. And my hope is that, I think the session that Reverend Jean Sekia is doing is, the world is waiting for Shinran Shonin or something like that. To me, that's the perspective that we really need right now. We're gonna need in the coming year, to get through this, especially here, in the States. So.
Thank you so much. Um, we have some time left. I do see some ministers also attending this lecture. Do any ministers have any questions or comments for Reverend Adams?
Oh, this looks like one from co-host. Do you want to read this one? There's one in the chat.
Oh, they say that, I think from Tomioka, they say that understanding is that one will be assured of birth in a pure land at the moment Shinjin blossoms in one's life through Amida Buddha. The moment of death is seen as the moment of birth. One question is, what are your thoughts on being born in the Pure Land in this life? Is that what Shinran Shonin taught us?
Interesting question. Um, that's not the way I read Shinran Shonin's teachings. So uh, the way that I appreciate Shinran Shonin's teachings is that, for me personally, birth in the Pure Land will occur, with the end of my life. And this is, I feel like when we read Shinran Shonin's teachings, Shinran Shonin doesn't talk about other people. He doesn't like say, those guys over there, they're the evil people, they're the akunin. He really is very introspective in his writings, and really always, to me, is always writing from his own personal encounter and experience, the Buddha's compassion. And so I feel like, to me, that's the way to read Shinran's teachings as well, is not to think about, oh, other people, this applies to other people, how this applies to those people, but rather how this applies to me. And so when I read Shinran's teachings, my appreciation for me is that birth in the Pure Land, I can only understand it to mean, for me, that it's going to occur with that moment of death. That that's settling, as Tomioka Sensei, if that's Tomioka Sensei's co-host says, that it's settled in this very moment. This present moment is when that birth is settled, but the actual attainment of realization that we're talking about, that occurs, the moment of death.
Jan Youth has a comment on, I think they're mentioning how Jodo Shinshu Buddhism is inclusive in the teaching, yet the behavior of people are discriminating and exclusive. So
Yeah, humans. It's we're a sangha composed of human beings, and I think that um, I think that is, that's going to be a reality. But um, I think it's incumbent upon us to always challenge ourselves to express the truth of the teachings in our own lives. And that's where I think the introspection is really important, to recognize the ways in which we we may be discriminating, or excluding others. And if someone raises a voice and says, this is my experience, this is something I observed, to really allow that to be that light, that person in that moment is a bodhisattva shining the light of wisdom into the situation, and then to really take that seriously in that introspective spirit of Shinran Shonin, think about, oh, not those people are being discriminatory, but no, how am I a part of that? How am I complicit? Or how am I, what can I do to, to step up and try to really make our sanghas to be an expression of really the heart of the Buddha, which is, I agree, to be inclusive.
Thank you very much. Are there any final questions? Well, that's everything for now. We have a little bit of time. Reverend Adams, do you have any final thoughts to share with us?
Um, no, I just want to thank you all for taking this time to join me, to join us. And yeah, it's just really an honor to be here with you and to join in your triple celebration service. Congratulations on a wonderful established legacy of the Honpa Hongwanji Hawaii mission, and yeah, glad to have all of you as fellow journeyers on this Nembutsu path.
Thank you very much. I am so sorry. We did have one
Yeah.
question. If that,
Say.
Reverend Komodo wanted to thank you for your lecture, and he wanted to ask, how do you interpret all five gates of the entrance from Jodo Shinshu's perspective or Shinan's perspective? Do we need these five gate processes?
I think that it naturally manifests itself in our experience, which is to say that I believe that it describes a process that we kind of flow through on our path to realization. But I don't know that we need to think of it as like a checkbox. Like, okay, I've got the worship. Now I need to do the praise. And then next I need to do the contemplation. And then I need to do the establishing of vows. And then finally, okay, now I'm ready to to emerge from the gates and do my merit transference. That's not the way I think of it. It's not like, like if you're going to, get a degree in biology, it's like, okay, you have to take biology 101 and biology 205, and you have to like go through this step, this step-by-step process to accomplish many things in life, rightly so, require us to move through stages. I don't believe that the path to awakening is that way, but I believe that the five gates do describe a process that is experienced by those who go for it.
Yeah. Ms. Jan, you just said thank you, and she appreciates the explaining of the inexplicable Alamida's grace more tangibly. So thank you. If there are no other questions, I think we can close. So thank you everyone for attending today's lecture. I hope that you found it informative and meaningful. We would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to Reverend Adams for his lecture. Adam Sensei, thank you for sharing your enlightening and thought-provoking insights with us today. We sincerely appreciate your contribution to our triple celebration. If you're interested in our organization, please visit our website through the QR code. As you can see over here, you can scan with your phone, or you can search for Honpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii. And if you have any questions about our triple celebration, please feel free to contact us at triplecelebration@honpahi.org, the address seen here below. And as you can see, here is the information regarding the events. If you're interested, past lectures will be found on our Honpa Hongwanji Mission of Hawaii's YouTube channel. You can look it up on YouTube, or you can, again, scan the link here to navigate to our channel. The next lecture is scheduled for Saturday, August 24th at 2 p.m. Hawaii time. The lecturer will be Reverend Jean Sekia, a resident priest of Zennoji Temple in Japan. He is also a translator at Jodo Shinshu Hongwanji Ha. His topic will be The World is Waiting for Buddhism and Shinran Shonin, Joy of the Nembutsu. This will be the last lecture of our 10-part series, so we encourage you all to attend. We'd also like you to please consider donating today. You can donate via mail or online. You can also scan the QR code here for convenience. And I would like to close today's lecture by reading Shinran Shonin's words written in the Kyogyoshinsho, which is his masterwork. Quote, to reveal with reverence the true realization, it is the wondrous state attained through Amida's perfect benefiting of others. It is the ultimate fruition of supreme nirvana. It arises from the vow of necessary attainment of nirvana, also known as the vow of realization of great nirvana. When foolish beings possessed of blind passions, the multitudes caught in birth and death, and defiled by evil karma, realize the mind and practice that Amida directs to them for their going forth, they immediately join the truly settled of the Mahayana. Because they dwell among the truly settled, they necessarily attain nirvana. Thank you again for your time today. Please stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you.
Namandavats, 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 namandavats.